Welcome everyone, especially our monks from the challenge, and I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me to speak again. This is the most sacred place in my opinion, because this is where the Hare Krishna movement was spread in the Western world, and we were talking earlier because we watched the Hare Krishna movie yesterday with the monks. So we saw the storefront, and how from here, this is where the first public chanting went out to Tompkins Square Park, just down the road. And from there, so much of this public chanting has been happening in New York City. It's just been spreading and spreading and then spreading throughout the whole world. So I'm very grateful, and you can really feel the spiritual vibration in this place. That it's not like any other place in New York. It's like once you enter, you're in this just peaceful atmosphere. So today we're reading from the Bhagavad-gita, which, has everyone here heard of Bhagavad-gita at this point? No? Oh, nice. Okay, so this will be the first time you're reading from it. And even I think our monks from the Be a Monk channel, we've been talking about it a lot. So we're going to just go deeper into the scripture. And I'll do a bit of an introduction also on Bhagavad-gita. So we're reading chapter 6, text 47. Yoginam api sarvesham madgatenantar atmana shadavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mata. The translation by Srila Prabhupada. And of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. Purport. The word bhajate is significant here. Bhajate has its root in the verb bhaj, which is used when there is need of service. The English word worship cannot be used in the same sense as bhaj. Worship means to adore or to show respect and honor to the worthy one. But service with love and faith is especially meant for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can avoid worshipping a respectable man or a demigod and may be called discourteous. But one cannot avoid serving the Supreme Lord without being thoroughly condemned. Every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus every living entity is intended to serve the Supreme Lord by his own constitution. Failing to do this, he falls down. The Bhagavatam 11.5.3 confirms this as follows. Ya esham purusham shakshad atma prabhavam ishvaram na bhajantya avajananti stana drasta patyantyada. Anyone who does not render service and neglects his duty unto the primeval Lord, who is the source of all living entities, will certainly fall down from his constitutional position. In this verse also the word bhajanti is used. Therefore, bhajanti is applicable to the Supreme Lord only, whereas the word worship can be applied to demigods or to any other common living entity. The word avajananti, used in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, is also found in the Bhagavad-gita. Avajananti ma mudha. Only the fools and rascals deride the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Such fools take it upon themselves to write commentaries on the Bhagavad-gita without an attitude of service to the Lord. Consequently, they cannot properly distinguish between the word bhajanti and the word worship. The culmination of all kinds of yoga practices lies in bhakti yoga. All other yogas are but means to come to the point of bhakti in bhakti yoga. Yoga actually means bhakti yoga. All other yogas are progressions toward the destination of bhakti yoga. From the beginning of karma yoga to the end of bhakti yoga is a long way to self-realization. Karma yoga without fruitive results is the beginning of this path. When karma yoga increases in knowledge and renunciation, the stage is called jnana yoga. When jnana yoga increases in meditation on the supersoul by different physical processes, and the mind is on him, it is called Ashtanga yoga. And when one surpasses the Ashtanga yoga and comes to the point of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, it is called Bhakti yoga, the culmination. Factually, Bhakti yoga is the ultimate goal, but to analyze Bhakti yoga minutely one has to understand these other yogas. The yogi who is progressive is therefore on the true path of eternal good fortune. One who sticks to a particular point and does not make further progress is called by that particular name: karma yogi, jnana yogi, or dhyana yogi, raja yogi, hatha yogi, etc. If one is fortunate enough to come to the point of bhakti yoga, it is to be understood that he has surpassed all other yogas. Therefore, to become Krishna conscious is the highest stage of yoga, just as when we speak of Himalayan, we refer to the world's highest mountains, of which the highest peak, Mount Everest, is considered to be the culmination. It is by great fortune that one comes to Krishna consciousness on the path of Bhakti Yoga to become well situated according to the Vedic direction. The ideal yogi concentrates his attention on Krishna, who is called Shama Sundar, who is as beautifully colored as a cloud, whose lotus-like face is as effulgent as the sun, whose dress is brilliant with jewels, and whose body is flower garlanded. Illuminating all sides is his gorgeous luster, which is called the Brahmajyoti. He incarnates in different forms such as Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he descends like a human being as the son of Mother Yashoda, and he is known as Krishna, Govinda, and Vasudev. He is the perfect child, husband, friend, and master, and he is full with all opulences and transcendental qualities. If one remains fully conscious of these features of the Lord, he is called the highest yogi. This stage of highest perfection in yoga can be attained only by Bhakti Yoga, as it is confirmed in all Vedic literature. Yasya deva para bhaktir yata deve tata guru tasyeta katita hyarta prakashante mahatmana. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. From the Sveta Ashvatar Upanishad. Bhakti rasya bhajanam tad iha mutro padi nairasyan yena mushmin manakalpanam etad eva naishkarmyam. Bhakti means devotional kind. Bhakti means devotional service to the Lord, which is free from desire for material profit, either in this life or in the next. Devoid of such inclinations, one should fully absorb the mind in the Supreme. That is the purpose of Naishkarmya in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad. These are some of the means for performance of bhakti, or Krishna consciousness, the highest perfectional stage of the yoga system. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purpose to the 6th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad-gita in the matter of dhyana yoga. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Satvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakandetamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gourange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishavanu Sutadevi Pranamami Haripriya Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, we're reading chapter 6 of Bhagavad-gita, where Krishna is explaining to Arjuna about the path of meditation. So, a brief background to the Bhagavad-gita for those who are new to it. So, this book, Bhagavad-gita, it's a very divine conversation that happened 5,000 years ago on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So, what was happening was Arjuna, who is from a very righteous family, they were being taken advantage of by other family members who would engage in all kinds of sinful and immoral activities. And they, the immoral side, called the Kauravas. So Arjuna is from the righteous side, called the Pandavas, and then there's the unrighteous side, called the Kauravas. And they're trying to take over the kingdom, and they're trying to do all kinds of wrong deeds. So eventually it came to a point where Arjuna, the Pandavas were trying to reconcile with them very peacefully before, but it just never worked out. So it came to a point where there has to be this battle. And at the beginning of the conversation, Arjuna felt, because he's so righteous, he felt like, how can he actually fight his family? Because his cousins, his uncles, even his guru, his teacher is on the opposing side. So it feels wrong to fight and kill your family members. We think we have problems in this world, but most of us are not asked to battle with our family to the point of killing them, right? So Arjuna is faced with this big dilemma. He doesn't know what to do. And he turns to Krishna, who is a very dear friend of his, but who is also the Supreme Lord, according to the Bhagavad-gita and the Vedic scriptures. So he's getting the guidance of God in this. And God just happens to be his very, very dear friend. And so he's asking, like, what do I do? I can't possibly kill my family. And you would think God would say, yes, don't do it. Violence is bad. But actually, what Krishna tells him is that it's your duty to fight. If you don't fight, they're going to keep doing the wrong thing. So it's actually your duty, and you're meant to fight. Arjuna is also from Arjuna's from a family of warriors. So it's their natural duty. Everybody has a duty in this world to perform according to their inclination. And Arjuna happens to be from a family of warriors. So their business is to protect. That's what they're meant to do. So if he didn't want to fight, it's almost like he's not doing his duty of protecting. Therefore, Krishna actually advises him, you're a protector, you're a warrior, you're meant to fight. But Arjuna, he doesn't want to accept this. He prefers, like, why don't I just want to be peaceful. Let me just go to the forest, and not have to deal with the situation. But Krishna tells him, if you fight and win, then there'll be victory to everyone. And if you fight and lose, then nobody can actually criticize you because you've been doing your duty. So there's actually no loss to fighting. But if you don't fight, then people will say you're a coward, basically. You lose your reputation because you're not doing what you're meant to be doing. So Krishna speaks to him about the path of karma yoga, which is doing your duty and your work, and then offering the results to God. And Arjuna, they went back and forth in this, and in the Bhagavad-gita, there's 18 chapters in this book. And it's kind of like Hadakran Prabhu was saying earlier to us in the challenge, that it's kind of like a sandwich, There's the first 6 chapters that are all about karma yoga, which is doing your duty and then offering the results to God. And then the last 6 chapters are about jnana yoga, which is like the yoga of wisdom. It's about renunciation, detachment, and philosophically understanding the position of God. And then the middle section, from chapters 7 to 12, is all about bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotional service. Now, yoga means to connect. That's what the word yoga itself means. It means to connect with the Supreme. So these are different ways that we can connect with the Supreme. And bhakti yoga in the middle section is like known as the yoga of connecting with the Supreme through love and devotion. And this, because we're right at the end of the 6th chapter, we're kind of introducing this middle section, which is bhakti yoga. So Arjuna basically says, I can't live in this world and fight, it's too much. So then Krishna gives him a taste. In chapter 6, in this whole chapter, Krishna is giving him a taste of, okay, you don't want to stay in the world and do your duty and fight, then you want to renounce everything, then let me tell you what real renunciation means. It's easy to say, I just won't do I won't do my work, I just want to go and be peaceful in the forest. But Krishna is telling him, actually, it's a lot more difficult than that to renounce. If we think we have a difficult life, needing to work, manage our life, and then offer the results to God, then he's actually showing us that it's actually more difficult to be in the forest, be renounced, because you have to do that perfectly. Your mind has to be completely clear. And the first thing he brings up is that the mind can be your enemy or your friend, right? Has anyone experienced their mind being their enemy? Right? Has anyone experienced their mind being their friend? Does anyone want to share like an example of either being a friend, being an enemy? Yeah?
Being an enemy, mind being an enemy, having negative thinking, a lot of negative and obsessive thoughts.
Yeah.
That with me personally is to the point where it can, if I let it, it can, what's the phrase I'm looking for? It can stop me from performing my activities of daily living.
Exactly.
I cannot concentrate at work, I cannot concentrate on doing anything.
Yeah.
As a friend, when I think of Krishna, it becomes the best of friends for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate, especially with the negativity. And I also can feel disabled by it, like I can't do anything. Anyone else want to share an experience? So, but those are really good examples and very relatable. So, it all depends on whether the mind is controlled, If our mind is out of control, then it's going to just go into all kinds of different things. We have no say in the matter. But when we're controlling the mind using something higher, which is the intelligence, or which is our spiritual practice, then we have control over what our mind focuses on, because the mind is very powerful. So Krishna is speaking to Arjuna and telling him, basically the uncontrolled mind is your enemy, and the controlled mind is your friend. And it's easy to see when our mind is controlled, then we can see everything that happens as an opportunity. But if our mind is uncontrolled, then everything we look at will be a problem, right? And if our mind is controlled, then we'll experience gratitude for everything that comes to us in life. If our mind is uncontrolled, then we're just only going to experience frustration. So all of this depends on what we're putting into our mind and how we're harnessing it. And if we have a controlled mind, then we'll be able to see that everything that happens to us is meant for our growth, like we were speaking about earlier. But if our mind is uncontrolled, then we'll think, I'm being punished, like everything's out of control. So, and actually Arjuna says in this chapter that to control the mind, he thinks it'll be easier to control the wind than to control the mind. Because that's how powerful it is. There's this analogy of a chariot. It's a common analogy where there's a chariot being pulled by 5 horses, and there's the horses are the senses, and the reins of the chariot is the mind, and the person driving this chariot and controlling the mind is the intelligence, and the passenger is the soul, our eternal constitutional position of being the soul, the eternal soul. So you can picture it. If the mind is uncontrolled, then those horses are just going to be running wild. They can run in any direction. And that's why the senses can drag us to all kinds of different activities that we don't even want to do. Like we may know something's bad for us, but we may not have the control to stop ourselves from doing it because the senses are running wild. But if the intelligence is strong, it can control the mind, and then the mind will control those horses, the senses. So the mind will rein those horses in and say, this is what we want to do. This is the direction we're going in. So it's very important to understand how to control the mind. And then later in this chapter, Krishna was saying, so the first thing you need, if you want to actually renounce, you don't want to fight, you don't want to work in the world, you want to go to the forest and just meditate, this is how you do it. You have to have a control mind. You have to live in a secluded place. And you lay kusa grass on the ground. And this place must be sacred. And then you fix your mind at one point, holding your body, neck, and head erect. And, staring at the tip of your nose. So you have to have a very specific posture. You have to have everything has to be clean. Your mind must be free. You must be completely celibate, free from any thoughts of sex, any fear. And you have to meditate on the Lord within the heart. You have to regulate your eating, your sleeping. Don't eat too much, eat too little, or sleep too much, sleep too little. Completely restrain yourself from mental activities. So, and what Krishna is describing here is the 8 limbs of the Astanga Yoga process, which is something that also came up a bit in our Be a Monk discussions today. So Astanga Yoga is the process of controlling the mind and senses. And the 8 limbs are, there's Yama, which is abstinence. So all the things we should avoid to take up this process strictly is, firstly, we have to be celibate, so no sexual contact, no violence, no greed, no sinful activities, basically. Niyama, this is what we're going to practice, our observances. We have to be truthful, we have to take up studying, we have to undergo austerities. And then there's the asanas and pranayama, which is what we know in society, in modern society today as yoga. We know there's 2 limbs of the Astanga Yoga process called asana and pranayama. These are very common. Asana is about the postures that we learn, and pranayama is this breathing. And these are ways that can help us control the mind also. Of course, for a yogi, and what Krishna is suggesting here is that we don't just do it for an hour a day, or like now and then when we go to yoga class. Actual yogis that are renouncing it, they are always in this, they're dedicating their life to it. That means 24 hours a day, they're practicing all of these things. They're living a very strict life, very difficult and unrealistic for us in our modern lives to be that strict with this practice. And then there's pratyahara, which is withdrawing the senses from the material objects, like a tortoise, who withdraws its senses inwards. And then dharana, which is now once you withdraw your senses inward, you concentrate the senses on the super soul within. And then dhyana, where you get into this deeper meditation on the super soul within the heart. And then finally, samadhi is when it's the deepest type of meditation, where you're completely indifferent to the world and very absorbed in the Lord. So imagine being in this state where you're practicing this at all times, all day. That would be really intense, right? It's not easy, not for the faint-hearted. So what Krishna is saying is that this is what, if you don't want to stay in this world and fight, this is what you have to end up doing. This is how seriously you have to take the practice. And then Arjuna says, this sounds impossible. This sounds like something I'll never be able to do. And then he asked Krishna about whether, what happens if I don't make it? What if I take up this very strict process, but I'm not able to continue for my whole life? Then what happens to me? And at that point, Krishna, so then Arjuna expresses I have a doubt about this. Will I just lose everything? Will I just, I won't be in the material world because I would have given it up, but I won't necessarily have already attained my spiritual perfection because I didn't follow through with it. So what happens to me? I'm in this in-between eternal state, So that was Arjuna's doubt. And then Krishna says, actually, there's no loss of diminution in your spiritual practice. He says you don't lose anything. We take our spiritual life is like a bank account. In the material world, whatever you gain, um, you do deposits and you do withdrawals. So whatever wealth you can get, you can also lose it. Any activity you do in the material world, you can get something and then you can lose it. But in spiritual activities, whatever we put into that account, whatever we try to do for our spiritual life, it's never actually lost. Even if we don't do it perfectly or we don't reach the goal, it's never lost. It's always there in that bank account. So Krishna is saying that even if you don't make it in this lifetime to get that spiritual perfection, then in the next lifetime you'll start off where you left off. We'll start off in a better position to practice spiritual life. So you'll either be born into a family that's very aristocratic, so it makes it easier for you to access spirituality, or you'll just be born in a family of transcendentalists who are already practicing, so you will naturally just pick it up. So he subdued Arjuna's doubt about that. And then we come to this verse, which is the introduction to the next section of the book, which is on Bhakti Yoga. And basically what Krishna is saying in this verse is that the highest yogi is one who's always thinking of me, one who's always absorbed in me. I just want to read the text again. Yeah, he says, of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So in this verse, Krishna is saying that from all of the stuff that was described, working in this world and offering your results to Krishna, or doing all these difficult processes of meditation and sitting in a secluded place, head erect with all the postures and everything, all of that is secondary, because what he considers the highest is one who is just absorbed in loving service to Krishna. That's what he considers the highest. And there is something called the yoga ladder that is explored in Bhagavad-gita. And there's different rungs on this ladder. So at the bottom, the first part is just karma. Karma means material activities. It's just what you do every day, right? Normal activities. Then above that is karma kanda, which is religious material activities, which means you're doing some religious practices, but the goal is to get something material from it. So you're doing it just kind of like out of duty, but really your desire is something material. And then higher than that is something called Sakam Karma Yoga, which means that you're doing spiritual activities. Now they're for Krishna, but your heart still has material desires. You're not doing it for the material desires, you're doing it for Krishna, but you're not free from material desires. You still want to enjoy in this world. You still want to experience some things in this world. And then one step higher than that is something called Nishkam Karma Yoga, which means now you're performing Krishna conscious activities, but you don't have any material desires left. You don't want anything from this world. You're just performing spiritual activities, which is a very elevated state. But even higher than that is Bhakti Yoga, which is pure love of Krishna. And that's where you are just dedicating all your activities to Krishna only. You have no desires, and your only desire is actually whatever Krishna wants you to do. Whatever service you can perform for Krishna that will make him happy. So this verse is introducing that whole sphere of Bhakti Yoga. And it is said that also by doing Bhakti Yoga, we actually get the benefits of all the other kinds of yoga, because it's a ladder. These are all processes that lead us one step at a time to Bhakti Yoga. So if you do Bhakti Yoga, you naturally get whatever result and benefit you're going to get from Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga. All of these things happen automatically in Bhakti. And it also happens in a quicker and easier way sometimes. And the whole idea behind Bhakti is that the highest reason to do anything is to do it out of love in the heart. There's many reasons why we do things in this world. We could do something out of fear, like how we work because, or we do, like maybe for our parents, when they tell us something, we'll do it because we're afraid we're going to get in trouble, if we don't do what they say. Or the next level is we want to get something material from it, some material happiness. So we do something just so we can get something. Like our parents may ask us to do the dishes and we'll say, okay, I'll do the dishes if I can like borrow the cow or something, you know, or just get something from there, some material thing. And then the next level higher than that is actually doing something out of duty. That means you feel responsible. Like, okay, I have to do my chores because this is what my parents told me to do, and it's my duty as a person living in this household to contribute something, right? But then the highest level is to do something out of love. That means my parents asked me to do something, and I love them so much. They've given me every single thing in my life. I would be nowhere without them. Like, I love them because of how much they care for me, and of course I'll do anything for them, you know, because I just love them so much. So that's the highest form. So this yoga ladder is kind of depicting like why we take up spiritual practice, right? The different reasons, like we're doing something for materialism, or now the highest is to do it just out of love, and that's bhakti yoga, where it's a very elevated state where we can just serve Krishna out of love because we're so grateful, we love him so much, we feel his presence in our life, we feel his love, and we just want to reciprocate in whatever way he requires us to reciprocate in. So it's very, I pray we get there, you know, to that stage, because it's very difficult, but this is very clearly setting the goal of what we should be striving for in this life. And there are some beautiful descriptions of Krishna, like the state of bhakti yoga is that the final state is that absorption in Krishna. So in order to be absorbed in Krishna, how can we do that if we don't know anything about Krishna? You know, he's just like a name if we don't know him, if we don't try to know him. So there's many ways to try to for us to understand and get absorbed in Krishna, and that can be through reading about him, hearing about him from advanced devotees who know him intimately, who have studied and experienced him. Chanting his holy names, because that connects us to him very deeply, and going to sacred places where his pastimes happened, or where there's a lot of chanting, like temples. Any temple has a lot of that spiritual energy infused, where there's a lot of glorification of Krishna. And therefore, when we go there and we associate with the devotees who live there, then we can get some of that knowledge from them, some of that experience. And then that will increase our absorption in our mind and in our heart, help us understand Krishna more. So there's some beautiful verses that were actually alluded to in this verse that we read in the purport. There's some verses from Brahma Samhita, which beautifully, it's a scripture that beautifully describes Krishna in the spiritual world with great detail. Venum kanvantam aravinda dalaya taksham parhavatam samasitam buddha sundarangam kandarpa koti kamaniya vishesha sopam govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. And this verse means, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with a figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. And then there's another verse that says, Alola chandra kalasadvana malya vamsi Ratnam gatam pranaya keli kala vilasam Shamam tribanga lalitam niyata prakasham Govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. Which means, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shamasundar is eternally manifest. So when we try to read more about Krishna, understand more about him from the scriptures, or from hearing from advanced devotees who experienced him, or from chanting, or from visiting the holy places, or from even just seeing his deity form in the temple. Everyone who's been to the temple, either Brooklyn Temple, Radha Govinda, or Bhakti Center here, Shri Shri Radha Muralidhar, we'd see, I know the monks just came and we were like studying the deities today, really looking at them and understanding like what's going on the altar. So that's all coming from these descriptions. You can see these descriptions are saying what he's doing. He's holding a flute. He's got a peacock feather in his head. His color, the color of his skin is dark like a monsoon cloud. He's got a garland of flowers around his neck that's swinging. And he's got a moon locket, some necklaces, and he's got jeweled ornaments. So all of these descriptions, there's so many descriptions. And when we see Krishna in that deity form, or when we just read about him or anything, we get closer to him, we can experience him in a greater way, and that will increase the ability for us to have our minds absorbed in him. I know that when it's difficult to think, I'm just going to absorb my mind in Krishna because we all have our duties to perform, we all have our work to do, and so many other things come up. It's not that we can just sit and be absorbed in Krishna. But when we take up a regular practice of spirituality, like this practice of chanting every day, just having some kind of spiritual practice that we commit to, chanting every day, reading every day, then if we continue consistently committing to that throughout our lives, then that absorption becomes more accessible to us. It's not that just by sitting down saying I'm going to be absorbed, we'll just get there immediately. We have to go through this whole process lifelong. But it's that consistency of continuing every day, whether we feel like it, whether we don't feel like it, whether it's difficult, whether we're falling asleep while we're chanting, or whether we really don't feel like reading, but we still push ourselves to read. That consistency is what builds up a life of practice. And then by the end of the life, you'll see that even when it's not possible for us because something may happen to our bodies at the time of, when we're about to die, we don't know what state we'll be in. We can't say, I'm going to be absorbed. I'm going to be focused on Krishna. We don't know whether we'll even have our mental senses properly. We don't know whether we'll know what our name is even. So many things happen at the time of death. But that life of practice, throughout our whole life, when we commit ourselves, then at that time, somehow our consciousness, like our soul, will be focused on Krishna. Whether our body is doing all kinds of things that we don't know about, we can't control, whether we're passed out in hospital, we don't know. But just by committing, then somehow Krishna comes into our mind, and that's the perfection of life. That's what we're all striving for, that we can focus on Krishna such that in our next life, we don't have to come here and go through this whole cycle of birth and death all over again. That we can go and reach his eternal world, and that we can be with him, and that we can experience that eternal reality, not the world of birth and death, the world of eternal life in spiritual happiness. So I wanted to see if there's any questions or comments or any reflections anybody has to share based on what we spoke about. Yeah.
So for newcomers, does the Bhagavad-gita recommend to climb the ladder or try to just get yourself to the highest point of the ladder? So what would you recommend people to do?
That's a good question. I guess it depends on what you're able to do. That's one thing. Obviously, if there's a staircase and there's an elevator, which would you choose, right? If you're going up a really tall building, what would you choose? You'd want to take the elevator because it's the quickest path. But somehow, if you're not able to, or you don't trust it, or maybe you find the staircase more familiar, or like that's where you're at right now, and then you're taking a slower path. It's okay because we also don't want to be artificial, We don't want to jump right into bhakti and then, struggle and then realize actually, maybe I should have just taken my time. Because also bhakti yoga is not something we can jump into, Like right now, all of us, we're trying to practice bhakti yoga, but we're not there where we're just doing something purely for Krishna, just purely out of love and service. We still have material desires. So we are actually probably on the point of sakam karma yoga, which is activities in Krishna consciousness, but we still have some material desires in our heart. So it's more like we want to strive for bhakti, we want to strive for the highest thing. Because then if we fall short, at least we're on the right path. If we strive for something lower, then we're always going to be lower, right? Because we're striving to just go through the whole yoga ladder slowly, then that's going to take time. So we do want to take that elevator, but it's not like we're just going to be at the top, on the first day or like even first 10 years. We don't know. So that's why I recommend. Also, the process of bhakti is much easier to practice, especially in this age. It's very accessible to us to strive for bhakti.
I'm following up on a distinction could be made between being at the top of the ladder, engaged in bhakti yoga, but with an immature, understanding and realization. So at the top, but still with desires that reflect the desires of someone who might not be engaged, someone else who might not be engaged in yoga at all. And then for some people who are engaged in the yoga that are represented by the lower rungs of the yoga ladder, but still be at the top. And I think that Krishna is recommending that. And I think that, like you said, if you're interested in, if you see a stairwell with many steps in a very tall building, and you see an elevator, I think most people would say, if you took the stairs, what are you, stupid? So, and that's actually the point, is Krishna's explaining the Bhagavad-gita. He gives a direct instruction, just surrender to me, engage in bhakti yoga. So the reason that the other yoga ladders are there, it's not because people are stupid, it's because they don't actually know. Some people do. Many persons aren't aware of bhakti yoga that that everyone here is so fortunate to get to learn about. So, but many people, they've only heard about, say, right, Swarbi Kunj was describing a lower stage of yoga, like some kind of meditation yoga, like say, like the Ashtanga yoga practice, some lower stage, and then within that, a much lower stage, like Hatha yoga, without necessarily even doing the first two steps, yama and niyama, or maybe some jnana yoga path, which is like people just, trying to abstain from material engagement and focus their mind on what they're contemplating as eternal or spiritual, and so they don't know that this opportunity to serve Krishna is right in front of them. So for them, they don't know. But for someone who does know, like many of us here and the rest of us were learning about it, that you have the opportunity to go to the top right away, then it's sort of like okay, so don't do that. You won't benefit. You won't benefit nearly as much. Like, it'll be really hard. So that's why Krishna teaches the Bhagavad-gita, right? He's explaining there's this type of practice, there's that type of the practice, there's this other one. Now you're getting to learn about all of it, and now you can see it all within the context of what's ultimately the real goal. And so.
Sometimes, I was just thinking, sometimes people may know both, but they don't believe bhakti is like the highest, because it's if someone's very attached to what they're currently doing, they want to believe like this is the highest. So you may see the staircase, you may see the elevator, they don't believe the elevator is going to take you to the top. So then you're like, I won't try it, that's also there. But I think if you study the scripture, like you study Bhagavad-gita, it's very clearly explained what Krishna is saying as to be the highest. And that's going to take you there. quicker. And even in the purport, Srila Prabhupada said all these other types of yoga, they culminate in bhakti yoga, as in the goal of them is to get to that point of bhakti yoga. So whether you do it slowly or fast, the point is the goal is bhakti.
Thank you so much for your wonderful
Thank
Qatar class speaking. I was just reflecting on how you were talking about how there's all these descriptions of Krishna, and this is like 100% for our benefit as well, because to be absorbed is not so easy. Nowadays we have so much ADHD and so much, like, very difficult to absorb your mind
In anything.
And when you have something so beautiful with so much so much beauty, you can't help but just feel, but also can't help but think, oh wow, peacock feather, everything that is described on Krishna is something special. So yeah, thank you. And also you were talking about how the reason why bhakti yoga is not so easy to come to is also because pure love is not so easy to just grasp. And so there's also stepping stones to purifying the heart, to actually be receptive, and also to experience and give pure love.
Yeah, it's such good points. Thank you for sharing. I was thinking about, like, when you were speaking about the peacock feather and all the things we see on Krishna. It's so nice that now whenever we go anywhere and you see a peacock feather, you'll think of Krishna because of these descriptions. It's like reading these descriptions, then more and more things can remind you of Krishna. Like now when you just see a necklace, you'll think, oh, how will that look on Krishna? You know, if we put it on the deity, or flowers, you think, how can we decorate the deity with these flowers, or make a garland or something? Like it changes your vision to to see Krishna and to see all the items associated with him. Like it's called tadiya, things that associated with Krishna that like stimulate our remembrance and our devotion to him. And also the point you made about pure love, that it's so it's almost like unreachable immediately, because generally whenever we have any desire for anything in the material world, it's always tinged with something for us. It's hard to just love purely. Like a lot of us, sometimes we can say we love Krishna, but it may be just because we want something from him. That desire to want something may still be there in a subtle way. Like we could be like 90% loving Krishna, wanting to serve him, but then like 10% for us, or it could be more, different ratios. So it's a gradual process throughout the life of purifying the heart and trying to focus less and less on our material desires, focus more and more on Krishna. And then by that process, he'll also purify the desires and remove them. We were speaking about having a higher taste. When you get something higher, then you'll give up the lower. So when we get that happiness from our spiritual practice, it's so high that eventually any other form of happiness that we try to strive for in this world is just going to seem insignificant. My spiritual teacher used to say that if you have material desires, which we all do, then he says just ignore them. Don't act on them. He described it like put it in a box, the material desires, and put them on a shelf, high up. And then you just go about, carry on practicing your spiritual life, chanting, reading, associating with the devotees, going to the temples, and just continue in your spiritual practice. And then later on in life, when you go and you take that box down and you look, you'll see some of the desires have disappeared, because that process would have purified our heart and removed the desires. Maybe some will still be there. And then you put them back on the shelf, and then you just carry on. And then sure enough, at some day you'll look and you'll see this box is empty, because your desires will be removed.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm kind of experiencing that. Very tiny changes I mean, I don't consider myself such a great devotee anyway. But as I'm getting more into chanting the holy name, and I do it at any point. I'm commuting to work, I'm chanting Hare Krishna. I'm going back home, I'm chanting Hare Krishna. I go to my flamenco class, I chant Hare Krishna. Anything, I chant Hare Krishna. And I notice desires that I had when I started, let's say last year, slowly those things are becoming less and less important. But the truly important things in my life are like coming toward the center, with Krishna being like the top of the priority list a little bit more. But I still notice I have a lot of things that I have to contend with, like smoking and drinking. But it's like, as I'm noticing that the more time I spend with Krishna, whether at home or at work or here, the easier it gets for me to slowly put my true priorities in order. And I'm noticing that like things that I used to enjoy years back, that were, they're like so wow, and it's getting harder for me to identify with that person that I was before. Not totally, but you know, it's getting harder for me to identify with how I was in those years before. But I still have, you know, se me van las palabras. Se me van
The
las
words?
palabras. Se me van las palabras. I'm sorry, I'm speaking Spanish and I'm losing my English here. Sorry.
It's okay.
¿Quieres que te ayude?
We have a Spanish person, he can
¿Cuál palabra
translate if
quieres
you
decir?
want.
Que a medida ha pasado el tiempo, las cosas que me atraían, personas que me atraían, como que ya no tienen importancia y como que ya, qué sé yo, que no me atraen, que no me llaman la atención.
As time goes by, like people and things that used to attract me so much, it just kind of fallen away. It doesn't even like get my attention anymore.
Como que no tienen ese brillo que tenían una vez.
Yeah, those things that were like so shiny, like lost that shine. It's like, okay, it's like not the same.
Pero por otro lado, mientras más leo el Bhagavad-gita y más escucho, me doy cuenta de que tengo tanto que aprender y soy una devota tan mala, tan y tan horrible.
The more I read the Gita, the more I realize how much I need to learn and the things I still need to clean from my heart.
Soy una devota malísima.
Just saying like this is a terrible devotee, but I feel like you're a devotee. You're making
Yeah.
progress. That's a big
Yeah.
progress.
I'm so glad you came here. You're Martha. Okay, yes, you were meant to join the Be a Monk challenge actually. So I'm glad that you came.
I was
I
going.
know. You weren't available, but it's so nice that we got to meet her anyway, right? Like I have a personal experience with this that I want to share because I always think of how funny it is. When I was a kid, I wanted to travel the world. Like it was to see all the 7 wonders of the world. It's because I watched this movie called Passport to Paris when I was a kid, like 12 or something. And it just looked so exciting. There's 2 American girls going to Paris and seeing the Eiffel Tower and all these things. And I was like, oh, I wanna travel the world. And then didn't do that when I was 12, obviously. And then grew up and then started practicing Krishna consciousness and just went into my spiritual practice. Forgot about this traveling the world desire. But then with my spiritual teacher would go to different places and he'd tell me like, oh, you should come and see this place and that place, like the spiritual community, the temples in the place. So then I ended up going to like Belgium and seeing our community, our spiritual community there called Radhadesh. I went to Germany, seeing some Hachalam, another spiritual community. And then I had this desire like, oh, I have to go to Paris because when I was 12 I wanted to go to Paris. So I went to Paris and I stayed at the temple. in Paris, and it's such beautiful deities and everything. And then I did what I wanted to do. I went to the Eiffel Tower, I went to the Louvre, I did all those places wanted to see. And I couldn't believe how bored I was when I did any of those. I was just like miserable. Like I go out and I just be miserable going to fulfilling my material desires from the past, but realizing I don't actually have them anymore. And all I want to do is just go back to the temple. Like I remember just being trapped in the Louvre actually because I couldn't find the exit. And I was walking around, it was like full of people, so I couldn't even see anything there. And I was walking around and it's like, I just want to get out of here. I just want to go back to the temple and take some prasadam, you know, I'm hungry when you eat something. And then when I ended up going to our farm community, just 2 hours away from Paris in France, called New Mayapur, that is like a castle and it's a temple. It's a temple in a castle. And then I was like, oh, this is the jewel. Like, this is the real tourist attraction of Paris, of France, I felt, because it was related to Krishna, you know? And then the same thing happened when I went to Australia later. It's like, I wanted to see Sydney Opera House and everything. When I went there, it was like, I was not interested. I was like, I just want to go back to the temple. I just want to be with the devotees and be with my spiritual teacher. And, you know, be in the kirtans, be in the enlivening thing. And then later when I went to London, I did not make that same mistake. I was like, I'm not, people were telling me, oh, go and see this side, go and see that side, see and a Big Ben. And I was like, no, I'm going to the temple. I'm just going to go on Harinam with the devotees. And you end up seeing everything anyway, right? You see the city, but you see it with the devotees through Harinam. And then when I came here, it was the same thing. Like, I won't go to Times Square unless we're having Harinam at Times Square. That's the only time I've been to Times Square. And so it's like, I can see how those desires of just wanting to travel and see things has been like sort of purified, and now I just want to travel and see Krishna, you know, see all these temples, all these devotees. That's what I want to say. I see, like, if I can have that experience, and I'm also like nobody, you know, like nobody great, but that means that's how powerful this process is, that anybody can have their desires transformed, you know, spiritualized, not just removed, but spiritualized. Then you develop a spiritual desire.
So I was just thinking about going back to the verse, right? Like the rungs on the ladder, and it's so interesting and so beautiful how like the lower steps in the ladder are actually like the ones you need the more qualifications to do. Like for dhyana, you need to be like a yogi that goes to a cave and meditates 24 hours a day. If you want to be a jnani yogi, you need to like study the scriptures and learn Sanskrit and this and that. But to attain like the highest is just like a heart that's fertile for love and to surrender. So it's like Krishna is so merciful that the highest is just the easiest, but it's also the same time where we need to like surrender our ego and like, you know what, I'll just follow you. So it's so, you know, beautiful. Like you don't need to know much about anything, you just need to want to love and I don't know, I just like find that so special. Right?
That's a really nice point. It's true, it's easier, you know, and that's Lord Chaitanya's mercy to us. That he's come and he's delivered, he's giving us this Maha Mantra that we chant, like the kirtan that we had at the beginning. It's such a simple process, but we can access the highest reality through it. So it's like, they say in Kali Yuga, it's just, you know, everything's difficult in Kali Yuga. It's an ocean of faults. It's known as like, everything's difficult. We can see how easily our minds are disturbed. Kali Yuga is like the time period we're in now. So it said that there were 4 time periods and they cycled through like seasons, right? So in previous ages, like Satya Yuga, it was very easy to meditate because everyone was so saintly. Their minds were peaceful. They were naturally inclined to spiritual activity. So for them, they could meditate for thousands and thousands of years, peacefully, silent meditation like that in the forest. Then in the next age, it became elaborate fire sacrifices was the process for spirituality. And that was also easy. Like it was easier for them to do than for us to do now. And then in the next age, it was elaborate deity worship. And they had the items and materials to do it, you know, like pure gold and everything was abundant. So they could do it. In this age, Kali Yuga, those practices would not be possible because we are just so disturbed in our mind. We're not naturally inclined to spiritual activity like they were in previous ages. So, and it said Kali Yuga is known as an ocean of faults. It means everything's difficult. It's characterized by quarrel and hypocrisy. And we see that all around us. Everyone, it's very easy to quarrel, very easy to create a fight. But the one jewel of Kali Yuga is that it's the easiest process for self-realization. That in this age, the best thing is that it takes almost no effort. The easiest process is simply to chant the holy names, and you can get the highest result from it. So that's like the one benefit of living in this age where everything's so difficult.
Quick question. Your teacher is Kanamba Swami.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible? Like, I have big affinity with him. He was a great master. I feel like.
I remember you told me many times.
Yeah. Is it possible maybe to say some experiences with you and him that categorizes him, shows how what kind of person he was? Somebody who never met him before but had a desire to meet him.
He is magnanimous. It's hard to describe. It's hard to describe him in short words, but just to say quickly, his mood was very much a great compassion. Just always extending himself to anyone who needed or wanted to be in some way connected, and he never saw the shortcomings of others. He only saw, when he looked at you, he only saw the opportunity of you becoming a devotee, of you, this tiny spark of interest in Krishna consciousness. So he'd never turn anybody away.
It was definitely a saint.
Yeah. We have so many saints walking among us due to this practice. So many people have met Srila Prabhupada and come here or anywhere in the world, and they have and through this process of Krishna consciousness, they become pure devotees. They become saints, and then their whole life is dedicated to just giving this knowledge to everyone.
Oh, but he's like, you can hear his conviction. Like, I saw some videos before he was dying. Like, even in death, he was like talking to Jay Advaita, and he was not afraid of death. He was just kind of fearless. He says, yeah, this. He says, suppose I should have done more, but too late now. Like, he was so surrendered even in death. That's a true sign of the sadhu.
Yeah, it's like what we read in the scriptures actually. So many saintly devotees, and when they're leaving their bodies, like I'm thinking of Bhishma Dev on the bed of arrows, clear consciousness. So many of them live in that clear consciousness, and it just shows how their life of devotion to God, devotion to Krishna, has kept them even at the time of death. They know where they're going. They know where their consciousness is fixed. They're not bewildered. So that's our goal also. Did you have something to say? No? Okay. I guess we can end because we're a little bit over.
Thank you so much. Great preaching.
Thank you for coming and inviting me.
Hare Krishna. Thanks a lot, Hare Krishna.